Welcome, welcome. This is episode 5 of Vibrant, Wild, and Free, and we're talking about embodiment as a vehicle for vibrancy. And this is Rebecca Schissler-Marshall, and we have the wonderful
Erin. Hello.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you can be here, Erin.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, Rebecca. And it's another great topic that we have, I think. So I will let you take it away and introduce us.
Yeah. So this is one that, as we were talking in the last few episodes, we were talking about how important being in the body, so that embodiment piece is being in the body, how important that is, and how that can enhance vibrancy, how that can lead to a more vibrant, wild, and free life, as we've been talking about over the last several episodes. So, one of the things that we both have seen in our lives is why being in your body can be so important and how that leads to much more magic.
Yeah, and I think I probably didn't even realize how in my head I was until this started coming up as a concept of being embodied, and sort of like, wait, what does that even mean? I can think about being in my body, but thinking about the body and actually feeling into it are two very different things. And once I started actually feeling into it and getting the messages, some are subtle and some are not so subtle, it was like a whole other world of information opened up to me.
Yeah. And I love, what you said, that part of that is what the description is. Because some people would say, like, what do you mean being in my body? Like, I have a body, like I'm in my body, right? But that's, a lot of us live in our heads and don't even know that that's what we're doing. So how would you describe that to people who are like, what do you mean by being in a body? And what do you mean by disembodied? How would you describe that?
Well, one of the core foundational mindfulness practices that I do with people in almost any group that I'm in is called a body scan. And so we go through very systematically the different parts of the body, inviting people to feel when was the last time you checked in with your ankle or your knee or your elbow. Typically, we're only in our body when something is wrong. And then we're in there in a particular way, which is judging, reacting, being fearful, resisting. If things are neutral or even good, we typically don't even notice. So it takes some practice, I think, for us in a culture to climb back into the body and to get to know some of those parts that maybe are not causing a problem. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's one of the core pieces. And that was the vehicle that got me back into my body slowly but surely. And I think I'm still getting to know my own body to some degree, but I'm vastly more aware and more intimate than I was before I started on this path.
Yeah. I love how you said that, right? It's the piece within mindfulness of, inviting in and noticing and just being present for, that is so, I think, is also so powerful. And it's that, like, the juxtaposition of that is what most of us are doing is thinking, right? Is thinking about things. Well, I don't know, should I do that? Let me think about it, right? It's part of what our culture is. Well, I don't know, I'm going to have to figure that out. I'm going to have to think about that. And that's part of the being in the body. The embodiment is not only an awareness of it, but also kind of the next level of paying attention to it for pieces of wisdom, right? For being aware of, like, oh, how do I want to do this thing? Or, as we were talking about in the last episode of, well, what wants to happen? Our mind doesn't always know what wants to happen, but our bodies are much more open to that wisdom and that awareness.
Right. And as our friend Mara likes to say, the body never lies. The body never lies. The mind, on the other hand, can lead us all sorts of astray for all sorts of reasons.
Yes. Yeah. And that's, one of the people that I follow, Steph Lagana, she always says the brain is a lying liar that lies. And that's the place that it's like, right, we have been trained to listen to only the mind and put the mind above all else, but the body is what never lies.
Right. And it's kind of a blind spot for us as a culture where we just assume, because we're so taught and it's so ingrained for us to bow down to the mind and the intellect and the rationalizing. And that was not the case throughout most of human history. People couldn't read even in massive numbers until relatively recently from an evolutionary standpoint. And so there's all sorts of information and ways of knowing the world that we have let atrophy to bow down to the mind. And, you know, it's great that we have so much knowledge and intellect, but the sweet spot and the magic is really taking that and accessing all the other pieces that make us a whole being.
Yes, that's, you know, what I was always taught is that the mind is very important and it's not a good master. Right. It's not the thing to lead us. It's a fantastic slave is the word that was always used of like, it's really good to carry out the tasks and do the things that we need to do, but it's not in charge. It shouldn't be the leader of our lives, really, because there's the emotions, the piece of fear that will take control and will lead us when, you know, that's not always what we want to have leading us. We don't want to have the thoughts and the fear leading us. We want to have our heart and our soul and our body leading us.
Yes, we want to have our heart leading us, our soul, our body, not the fear.
Yes.
Not the fear. And this, who was it? James Joyce, I think, has a line in one of his books, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. And I think a lot of us do that without even knowing. We live a short distance from our body. And when we don't even realize it and we're doing it, we also have a culture that's sicker than, I don't know if it's true to say any other culture, but I think any other American culture, I think that would be true. Yeah. And so that's another consequence of being so disconnected from the body. We miss the cues, we miss what the body wants in terms of hunger, of food, of movement. Yes. So there are consequences to the disconnection that can be little or maybe less than little.
Yeah, I have clients who don't really know when they're hungry. Mm-hmm. And that's so, you know, it's so common because we've been taught, like, I think we mentioned this in a previous episode, right there, you know, you kind of follow, like you're told in school that, well, lunchtime is at this time, or at work, you know, lunch is at this time, and this is when you take a break. But maybe your body's clock needs something different. Maybe your digestion is a little bit different, in that those subtle listening skills are like building a muscle. It's building a practice, and it does affect health. I'm so glad that you brought that up, that it's not just like a neat little party trick of paying attention to your body. It's so important for, like, well, what does my body need? Does it need to rest right now? Does it need to not just eat, but does it need a certain thing to eat? And we've been so conditioned to listen to, what does the mouth want, or what does the mind think it wants? Like, oh, I'm really tired, so I need a little energy boost, so I'm going to grab this sugar or this caffeine, when really the body's like, no, please, like vegetables and, you know, good food that is sustaining to me to keep me going.
Mm-hmm. Or maybe even just water. Maybe you're thirsty.
Yes.
So yeah, you're right, Rebecca. We're taught to override the cues from a young age. So we come by this disembodiment naturally in our culture, but there's all sorts of value into becoming more embodied. And I thought I would share a story about how this has really helped me in my life. I was trying to make a decision about a job at one point, and I was really confused and I was really spinning my wheels. And when my mind made the lists, it felt pretty clear that I should stay. I was making more money than I had ever made. There were all these other reasons why the mind wanted me to stay. It was secure, it felt safe, on and on and on. But the problem was my body had a diametrically opposed opinion about the situation. And I didn't necessarily know that's what was going on at first. I just thought I was confused, and I was confused. But once I got clear about, okay, This is what the mind is telling me. I got that. Now, let's see what the body is saying. The
Yes.
body, the message was so clear. It was so clear. My heart was so heavy and so sad at the thought of staying, and so contracted. There was a physical contraction to it.
Mm.
And I finally was able to say, you know what? If I stay here, I'm going to get sick. I can feel it.
Right.
There may not be an actual sign that we can measure, a test that we can do, but I just know that I'm going to get sick. And that is not worth it. There's not enough money in the world for that to be worth it. So once I got down to that level of feeling into it, it became so clear and the confusion lifted.
Yeah. You know, I love that you gave that example too, because it's not just like eating, you know, a particular thing to listen to the body. It can also be the emotions that can cause illness, and that the body can give us information about that, about, you know, what do I need in this moment? What wants to happen? And if my heart is saying one thing, that too, if we're not listening to our heart, that too can cause illness, that can cause challenges that, you know, can lead to long-term consequences down the road. And that's so, it's again, another thing that we aren't taught, like, you know, the body is here to give this information. And if we listen, it can be of benefit to us emotionally, physically, mentally, all of those pieces.
Right, right. And it's easier. It's easier in a way because now it's like I have a whole extra resource, amazing resource available to me. Whereas the first however many decades I was not connected with my body, I was moving through life with a big handicap.
Yeah, and I love that, you know, it's like it is an extra tool. And I remember, you know, for most of my life, I had a really hard time making decisions because my mind was so strong. It was like, here are the pros, here are the cons. Well, they're equal. So what do I do? Like, you know, I could come up with pros, I could come up with cons. And now, you know, and this is, you know, it's still something that's evolving and I'm practicing it. The more high stakes it is, the more challenging it is for me. But now it's like, oh, I just check in with my body and I go with that. Like that's the truth chord, right? That's the yes that I want to find is what the body is, and the mind will scream, da, 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 but the body is saying, you know, this is what is so.
And you've learned to trust it, it sounds like.
Much more than I used to. Yeah, I mean, you know, again, the culture definitely says follow the mind, and the conditioning is that. But I have practiced. Again, it's any type of, you know, awareness practice, anything like that. It takes practice, and so I have practiced saying yes to it, and my experience has been I never regret it. When I listen to the body, I don't regret it. When I listen to the mind, it's like 50-50. Like sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not. And how about your experience? What's your experience in terms of listening to the body and, you know, regretting or not regretting choices made from the body?
Well, similar to you, when I listen to the mind only, it's a crapshoot. Yeah. It's sometimes great, and it's not like I totally have the mind out of the picture at this point. It's like you can find a sweet spot where you got all the amazing things that the mind can do and can navigate. And when the mind and the body are on the same page, then it's full steam ahead.
Right.
It's when there's some discrepancy that I cannot and I will not override my body at this point, because I've learned that it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Yeah.
I love that. It's not, that's the piece that I think is so important, right? That it's not worth it. That the consequences of it just are so much bigger than when you start playing with it and you start trying it. It's like, oh wow, this isn't just which one do I want to do? It's really makes big consequences is the only word I can really think of to describe it, of the long-term benefits of listening to the body, right? The long-term consequences far outweigh not listening to the body.
That's so true. That's so true. So for anyone listening or watching that is intrigued and wants to get started, what would you suggest, Rebecca, as a first step for somebody to become more embodied?
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the body scan. I think mindfulness is a really, and it's part of part of why I love yoga too. Yoga and mindfulness are really great practices to help you become aware of the body. And I think, we've mentioned before, like, you can't access this wisdom if you aren't connected, right? So sometimes it's just a practice of learning how to really climb into your body and be aware of what's there. So one of the things I'd like to do with my clients is to just even begin to feel the breath in the body. What are the physical sensations you feel when you're breathing? So the air against the nostrils, or your chest as it rises and falls, or your belly as it expands as you breathe. Or, how would you know that your feet were there if you couldn't see them or you didn't wiggle your toes? Like that kind of, the way I imagine it is, those real cozy old, they were like when you were kids and you would zip them up, the onesies with the feet in them. I like to imagine that it's kind of like climbing into one of those, and that you can climb into your body, putting your feet in first, and then imagining like all the way up the leg, and then all the way up the other leg, and then, the torso and the arms, and then what does it feel like up the front of the torso, and then, what does it feel like in the head too? So, mindfulness-based stress reduction, that body scan is a great way to do it in that particular way. Or in yoga, deep relaxation is the other way that usually incorporates that piece.
Right. Those are all such great tips. You can be mindful of the breath. You can do a whole body scan. Yoga is a great way to be embodied. But it takes some practice. It takes, I think, an investment of time to get to know your own body, your subtle body at a different level. So if that's something that is intriguing to anyone listening or watching, I suggest you make some time to get to know yourself in a different way. And there's all sorts of guided practices online, embodiment practices that you can find for free. And Rebecca and I have free offerings that we're happy to share with you. But make some time to be with yourself, to check in, to see how your body's feeling below the level of the mind is going to want to get involved, and it's not going to like taking a back seat, and it's going to, maybe try to distract you or tell you what you're feeling. And so you can just recognize that, have a playful relationship with it, and just come back to feeling and seeing what you notice. And every day will be different. Every moment will be different. So there's endless opportunities to get to check in and to see what's going on.
Yes. Yeah, I love that, right? It can just be as simple as setting an alarm on your phone and just being like, well, what do I feel right now? What's happening in the body in this moment? Maybe it's just that you're hungry or that you're tired. It could be as simple as that. Or it can be a bigger, longer process of a full, a body scan, or, just checking in with the breath even. Just, okay, well, am I breathing? Do I notice I'm breathing? Like that can be a really good anchor to come back to, because again, you aren't going to be able to access this unless you're connected.
That's right. Unless you're connected, unless you stop and press the pause button and stop all the doing and get busy with being present.
Get busy with being. I love that. Most of us are not busy with being. That is. And, I think that's actually, I want to, highlight that point of, we often get busy with doing because there's something there we don't want to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. So whether that's a really uncomfortable emotion or pain, as you mentioned, right? Often it's like, I tell my clients, well, let's get in the body. And they're like, are you kidding me? I'm in pain. Why would I that's the last place I want to be, is in my body. And so it is building that relationship of, well, how can I, develop this compassion for this, thing that has been in pain, this part of
Yes.
me that's been so, struggling with pain or not feeling well or not having energy, all of those pieces.
Yeah, that's such an important, crucial point, is that you want to do all of this with great compassion and gentleness and kindness. And if it doesn't feel safe, if there's certain parts of the body that don't feel safe for you to investigate because of whatever reason or whatever has gone on in the past, then no pushing, no judging, no forcing, just, yeah.
Right. Because if you show up to see the body and it's all the judgment comes up about, oh, I don't like this part of me or that part of me or like that, then that's, it would be like showing up to a party and somebody telling you all the things that you didn't, that you were uncomfortable with, and they pointed it all out. Like, that's no fun. So it's gentle, kind compassion, like just showing up in that most gentle way. And again, as Erin mentioned, there are a lot of resources for that way of being. Loving kindness, for being compassionate. Self-compassion is such a huge piece of, I know, the work that both of us do, because without that gentleness, then that relationship with your body isn't nurtured, and you end up, wanting to not be there.
Right, right. Well, maybe those are some great tips for now. Maybe we do another episode on self-compassion, which is a really important topic for many, many of us, myself included.
Yeah, me too.
So we'll put our links below so you can, if you want to reach out, if you want some more resources, we're happy to provide them. And we wish you good luck and fun with reconnecting with yourself in maybe a new and more compassionate and gentle and connected way. So
Wonderful.
thank you, Rebecca, for this session. It's always a delight for me to get to play with you. And thank you to anyone who is listening or watching. Wishing you well on your journey.
Thank you so much, Erin. Bye.